Absolutely. I had teachers who did that for me. You mentioned your mom being a teacher and my daughter's going to be a teacher. I had teachers who did that for me. I was in 3rd grade and had Dr. Ann Weiss, and when I was no longer in her class, when we were living in government housing, again, we couldn't afford shampoo or conditioner or anything like that. She would collect the little sample size anytime she went to a conference or stayed in a hotel. She would collect them, and then she would come bring them to me. And she was literally taking her own life into her hands because the government project where we lived, in fact, if you Google it nowadays, Haverstock Hill Apartments, you'll see reviews that say, "Oh, there are only a few murders. It's not that bad. Just mind your own business. You'll be fine." So she did that for me. And then one other teacher, my senior year, she she was married to an Exxon executive. She taught because she loved it, not because of money. And she paid out of her own pocket to have 4 personal computers put in her classroom. And every morning I would come in and I would search for scholarships. And then I would, print out a letter asking for the application. These were very early internet days. So I would mail the letter. They would mail the application back. I would fill it out with a typewriter. That was my first credit card purchase. I wanted a typewriter so my applications would look nice. And then I would mail those back. And one day I came in the morning just like any other day, and she didn't look good. And I asked her, and she said, "No, I don't feel well." And she was hospitalized. I asked if I could come visit her. She said no. She didn't want me seeing her like that. But before she passed, and she passed 6 weeks later from when I asked her if she was okay, she told her husband before she passed to give me one of those computers out of her classroom so that I would have a computer to take with me to college.
That's Adriene Caldwell, a former foster youth and author of the upcoming memoir, Unbroken, Life Outside the Lines. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. This is part 2 of my conversation with Adriene Caldwell. In the first episode, which I recommend you go back and listen to, we discussed her family growing up in poverty, her difficult experience in foster care, being groomed by an older man when she was 14 years old, struggling with her mother's mental illness, and how even though her mother was deeply troubled, she gave profoundly wise advice that Adriene used to transform her life. Today, we're going to discuss more of those people who made a difference. Adriene was born into a family saturated with dysfunction. As Adriene's mother became increasingly unstable, Adriene was the only person, despite her young age, that her baby brother could rely on. Her memoir is raw and unflinching, and it chronicles the devastating impact of neglect, abuse, mental illness, failures of systems that are designed to protect the most vulnerable among us, and the resulting trauma. Adriene's story involves a lot of difficult life events, topics we often struggle with discussing in society. As I mentioned last week, they're often the profound traumas that happen behind closed doors, the ones that are easy to push into the back of our minds if we're not in proximity to them. As I've said more than once, I think it's important that we face these issues in order to come up with the solutions that are going to help us lessen the unnecessary suffering in the world. Adriene faced emotional and physical abuse, was targeted, as so many vulnerable women are, by an older man who initiated a sexual relationship with her in her early teens. She faced poverty. She was surrounded by mental illness. her family found themselves homeless at points, and she ended up in foster care. The world around Adriene was so dramatically different than her peers. It was filled with untimely deaths, violence, eating disorders, incest, and suicide. And it's easy in society to think, as I mentioned last week, that these issues are intractable. But we've done it before through a lattice work of awareness, reduction in stigma, new standards, regulations. We've taken on some of our toughest challenges. As we discussed in part one, her story also has powerful moments of hope and insights about how the act of one person can make such an enormous difference in a person's life. We've discussed families that break apart a number of times on this podcast. But one of the common threads that runs through all of this suffering is that there is an opportunity to find insight, to grow, to heal, to learn, and find inspiration. And with that, we'll begin our second part. One of the things I noticed when I was doing my research for this conversation is it really took me aback the number of foster children who struggled to get a college degree, and you did, who struggle with all sorts of things like abuse and trafficking, all the ones, the rate of PTSD was about 25%, which is, twice the rate of US war veterans. And by that, I don't mean military veterans, people who have served in the military, but people who have actually gone out to war. The PTSD rate for foster care children is higher. And I think sometimes we look at certain things in society, like foster care, as like a necessary evil. We've got to have it. It's not perfect. We can't make it perfect, but I have a feeling we can make it better. And and I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about your experience in foster care.
Absolutely. So you gave out some great information. I wanted to add just a couple of things. So 7 out of 10 girls who graduate from foster care will have a baby by the time they are 21 years old. And that cycle just starts all over again. They're not prepared to be mothers. They haven't had the role models. They don't have the vocation or the ability to provide for themselves and their child. 7 out of 10 by the age of 21. And the other statistic that I like to point out is that 20% of the US prison population, so 1 in 5 prisoners, has had experience with foster care.
Yes. And another one that just really grabbed me is that foster youth by their mid-20s, 50% were unemployed at a time during this period in this research where our unemployment rate in the United States was 5%.
Right.
That is astounding.
What's even worse to hear is the fact that foster, if you're awarded the state, so I was awarded the state of Texas, I could go to any public state university and my tuition and fees were completely covered. Now, when I was going through this, I still had to cover my rent and food and books and all of that. But now they even have programs to help with all of that. But college isn't for everybody. And this tuition waiver also applies to vocational training. If you want to be a plumber, an electrician, a hairstylist, these foster kids can get professional training free of charge. And we're still not seeing them take advantage of it. And I strongly believe that until we put more money into our kids, until we make them a priority, we're going to continue hearing these horrifying statistics. We are not doing enough to take care of our kids. We're just not. When you have caseworkers who have 25 to 30 kids on their roster, they can barely keep up. Kids are bouncing between emergency shelters, temporary foster homes. It's We are not providing professionals with the support and the money that they need. Uh, Social workers, caseworkers are paid a pittance, just just ridiculously low pay. And I know that there are organizations out there trying to make change, but until we as a society say that it's time for us to invest in our children, and these children are our children, they do belong to the public. We are responsible for them because their families weren't able to take care of them. They've become our burden, and we need to stop seeing them as a burden and start seeing them as an opportunity.
And at the end of the day, that is the purpose of society. We exist in a society, we exist in clans and groups and teams and countries for the purpose of being able to take care of each other. Otherwise, we'd be running around fighting the lions and hyenas on our own. And so for me, it just, one of the things that I wonder about from your own experience, and I know, you know, for a lot of people, there are upsides and downsides, and a lot of traveling from foster home to foster home. Inevitably, someone has a bad story. There are some people who do have good stories, and they come across. But when we look at those statistics and we look at the totality of them, you know, you can't look at an outlier case where someone had a completely good experience and sort of use that as model when you have a systemic problem. What do you think is at the core of those systemic problems? And, what have you picked up from your research? What have you picked up from just your own lived experience?
Sure. So we have a top-down problem. Foster children are rated based on their level of needs, be that psychological, emotional, physical, developmentally. They're rated. And the higher the rating, the needier the child, the more pay the foster parent receives. And what that does is it creates a perverse incentive to keep that child at that level rather than providing incentive to help that child recover and to gain skills and to grow and to receive the therapy and the support and the psychiatric and psychological components that they're just not getting. They've been through trauma after trauma. And in my case, my foster parent was the trauma. She dehumanized us foster girls. We lived in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. The foster girls, there were anywhere between 4 to 6 or 7 of us. We had the master. There was a half bath in there. When we took a shower, there was one full bathroom. So it was the toilet, the sink, the shower. The last foster girl to shower had to clean the tub with Comet before the foster family would take a shower or bath in the tub. And they used the excuse that it was because of the granddaughter who was 2 or 3 years old, that she was taking a bath and the tub needed to be cleaned. That was complete horse, you know what. And we had to sit on the floor like animals. We were not allowed to sit on the furniture. We were given different dishes, different silverware. We were not allowed to eat off the same plate. We didn't even eat the same food. They had steak and lavish meals, and we were with hamburger helper and tuna casserole. And she just ingrained in us our inferiority. And just a couple of quick things to give you an idea of the woman that I lived with for 3 years. I was trying on a swimsuit and I came out and she looked at me and she said, "Your thighs are fat. I'm surprised you haven't started throwing up to lose weight."
How old are you?
I was 14, maybe 15.
Mm,
And that started a battle with bulimia that continues to this day.
I can't imagine why you were vulnerable at that age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that she said or did, it'll come back to me in a minute. I'm drawing a blank right now, but I don't believe people are inherently bad. I can't believe that. I think people make the best decisions they can with the information they have at the time. And that's generally how I view people. But
Yeah.
she is the one woman I have been unable to forgive because of what she did to us.
Well, forgiveness is a gift, remember? Right?
Yes.
It's not,
And
or I guess,
it's for myself.
right.
I
It's for
want to
you.
forgive her so I can let go of that pain and that hurt.
And I
But
think,
I'm still not there.
you really caught my attention with something that you said in that. And that's the point you were making about the perverse incentive that exists. If foster parents receive a higher reimbursement rate for kids with special needs or who require sort of therapeutic or specialized care, for some people, theoretically, that can really result in an incentive structure that creates real risk. But I can imagine a system where practically there were guardrails on it. And something else you said before made me really think about it. You brought up that point about social workers. They were paid better, or if they were doing other things. Because what would protect against that perverse incentive is that the foster parents didn't really control the child's treatment plan, that progress is monitored by multiple professionals. You
Here's
know,
the thing.
yeah.
They the therapists and, uh, it's outsourced. It's not even it's not even completed through the state of Texas or through state regulators. It's outsourced to for-profit companies. So not only is the foster parent disincentivized to help a child improve, the company who is the foster parents report to the company, the for-profit company, not the state of Texas.
Well, and one of the dangerous things of reporting to a company, as opposed to, let's say, a state social worker, just giving you an example, there is you lose the individual accountability, right?
Exactly.
And it becomes collective. So if the state wants to take an action, it has to look at the entire contract and decide whether to take that action based on that entire contract. When the person is a state employee, it's going to be much more based on their individual performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's it's there are many, many problems with the current setup, with the current dynamic. And the fact is many foster parents, they don't have a profession or a vocation. They take in foster kids as their job. That's how they make their money. And I'm not condemning them. You can do both. You can take in foster kids because that's what you're capable of and willing to do, as well as help and protect and help these children to grow and to blossom.
And I
But there
certainly know foster parents who treat their foster kids like they're their own. Like you wouldn't even know.
No,
Yeah.
but I don't wanna demonize all foster
Right.
parents. I definitely don't. But the reality is there are many, many foster parents who are doing this for a paycheck.
Right.
And
And we
I
have to guard against it. We have to.
exactly, we need that protection. We need that accountability. And the accountability can't come from a for-profit company who loses money when a foster kid gets better, when they start making improvements emotionally, psychologically, mentally, developmentally, when they get pay cuts for the kid thriving and doing well.
And I am
A perverse incentive.
And I have to imagine we also have to look at things like, educational disruption that can happen because of changes in foster care, someone leaving the program and the kids having to move, housing instability that a lot of people who grew up with their biological parents don't face because their biological parents can help them make the transition. Like, there are a lot of things that we could think about. One thing, though, that really struck me, you said earlier in the conversation that you don't have nightmares about your mother, even though she was schizophrenic, abusive, and you guys were in a really rough situation, but you do about your foster parent. Why? Why is that?
Because she stripped me of my humanity. What she did to us. She had an alarm outside our bedroom door. We were literally, if we needed to leave the room for a glass of water, an alarm, a siren would sound. And she she did everything in her power to belittle and demean us. And we did all of the work. I ended up painting her house inside and out. And uh, I would watch her daughters sit on the couch while we did the cleaning. We would strip the floor and reseal it. We painted. We did all of the work. It
Sounds like Annie, like a realistic scenario where she was treating you like you were the orphans and the.
Yes, absolutely. I had to put bleach in the water, in the dishwater that I used to wash their dishes because the foster kids were dirty.
Mm.
Yeah.
One of the things that eventually happened for you, you were able to really do well from an education perspective, and you were able to, even go off to law school. And I'm curious, in aging out of the foster system and being in that environment, and then also, you know, dealing with that abuse you were dealing with from the outside. Man, all these things were going on. How did you maintain your ability to pursue those goals and those dreams?
I didn't. I hate to ruin the end of my book, but I didn't.
Tell me about it.
Um, I became addicted to cocaine while I was in college. I did not go to rehab. I went to Germany to live with my host family as a junior in high school. I won a congressional scholarship to move to Germany for a year as like an American ambassador to the country. And when I was in college, I recognized that if I did not get off of cocaine, it was going to ruin my life. So I went to Germany where I knew no one in connection to cocaine and I got off it, but I replaced it with alcohol.
Mm.
And by the time I got into law school, I was in no shape whatsoever to continue down that road. I I was incredibly suicidal, and I noticed that's a topic that you had mentioned we might discuss later, at least from your notes. And I honestly don't know how many times I attempted suicide because there were attempts made while I was blackout drunk. I was a functioning blackout drunk. And one time I took a bottle of pills. One time I sliced my wrists. And according to my best friend, I was playing with the vein.
Mhm.
And I don't remember these things. That's how desperate I was to stop the pain, to stop the hurt. And my ultimate suicide attempt, I and this is in the prologue, which I believe you read. I put a gun to my head and I pulled the trigger twice. You still with me?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
I the safety engaged by less than a millimeter. It, my hand must have brushed over it when I was getting the gun ready. And it is a miracle that I'm alive because I shouldn't be, because I pulled the trigger twice.
What do you think kept you from trying the third time?
I was broken.
Mm.
At that point, I I was broken. I didn't I had tried to kill myself so many times, pills, razors, um, just the gun, and none of it worked. People don't realize this, but the body works very hard to keep itself alive. If you down a bottle of pills, your body's going to regurgitate them. So, um, I am here, but for the grace of God.
I have a client who had many suicide attempts, hasn't had one in a while. One thing he said to me, I was asking him after his last suicide attempt, what what kept him, because this is what we're trained to do, right? To talk to people about what kept them from doing it another time, so they have that to hold on to. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, I failed at killing myself so many times. I just felt like such a failure. And he said, that's all that kept me alive.
Yeah.
I was like, well, hold
I
on to that because it's by the grace of God. Like, I'm blessed that he made it.
I I had an experience that evening in the psychiatric hospital where I felt this wash of peace and calm come over me. And that's when I knew that I was not going to be released from this earth until I had fulfilled my purpose.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what that purpose is. It didn't come with a memo. Would have been nice, but I knew at that point that I wasn't going to be allowed to quit. And that was my last suicide attempt.
How old are you
So
at that time?
I believe I was 23.
Yeah. Earlier you said you hadn't made it when I had mentioned going off to law school and getting your education. But in many ways, I think you have, right? You survived and you're thriving on some level right now. And, you're very honest about the fact that it's a struggle. And I just think that's the truth for all of us. One of the things I remember when I was psychiatrically hospitalized for the first time, I love talking to the psychiatrists. I love the science. My social worker was amazing. Actually, the food was quite good too. But 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 my favorite part was art therapy. I really loved it. And it was kind of cool. It wasn't like we were in an art room or anything like that. We were just like in a regular room doing group therapy and you get thrown a sketch pad and we're all sitting there. And we were asked, what is recovery like, right? As the question. And we all started drawing. And I drew a mountain range and it had peaks and valleys. And the therapist asked me, why a mountain range? And I said, well, like growth doesn't go all up. It goes up and it
True.
goes down. And,
Very true.
and the hope is just that there are higher lows, higher highs, and the lows are not as deep. But even if there are parts of the mountain range where it does get deeper and you go further into a valley, you're moving forward. And I think that is something. I think it's actually something more powerful, because if I walk on a flat road 10 miles and you make it 10 miles climbing mountains and walking through valleys, I think we can say you accomplished something greater than my 10 miles.
Hmm. I don't know. I would almost see the peaks and valleys as the better adventure.
That's exactly what I mean. That's what I agree with you completely on that one. It's so enriching. Like, when I look at all the things I really like about myself right now, or that other people tell me they like about me, pick both. It's all for my suffering and my mistakes, my falls and my weird moments. It's so enriching to walk those peaks and valleys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could do with less valleys, more peaks.
So true. But we might,
We don't get to choose our path.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so true. You had mentioned earlier that you got a chance to see your mom as she was doing better, and you got to reconcile on some levels with some of your family. What, and you told me a little bit about what that experience was like, but what was it that even got you to walk through the door?
So, little history. I had not seen my mother in 10 years. In fact, when she was relinquishing parental rights, I was in a room next door. And the caseworkers and everyone was really encouraging me to say goodbye to my mother, because she was relinquishing rights. And I refused. The beating that she had given me a week prior, or maybe it was a couple weeks, I don't know. Um, it was with a wooden dowel rod, the wooden thing that you hang your clothes on in your closet.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she used to beat me. And I refused to see her. I couldn't. And I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
Yeah. What caused you to walk through the door?
So, um, after 10 years of zero contact, I started to get curious. And so this was 97, 98, the burgeoning internet. I went on, I paid the $100 to White Pages, and I got her last known addresses and phone numbers.
Mm.
And I called one, and it was a homeless shelter in El Paso. And they said that she wasn't there at the moment, but they would take down my information and they would reach out if she came back. And almost a year passed, and they actually called me back. She returned, and I just envisioned this Post-it note on somebody's desk saying,
That sat there for a year.
yes,
Wow.
yes,
That's cool.
call Adrienne if her mother returns. And so I got in touch with my mother, and it was close to time for me to go off to law school, and I wanted to see her. And it's one of the best things that I did, because I did get the closure. I did get the confirmation that she did love me, that she was making the best decision she could at the time, that she was sorry for some of the more extreme things. And I got to see her thriving,
Mm.
doing well on medication. She wasn't able to work. She stayed home and watched Judge Judy and CSI cases and smoked Marlboro Lights like like they were going out of fashion.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. We actually went and got a 12-pack of Bud Light, and we
Nice.
sat down, and we got kind of tipsy together, and it was great. But I didn't need her as a mother anymore. My Aunt Rose filled that role for me. And I had lived with my Aunt Rose in 4th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade. I always say, God didn't give me a mother and a father. He gave me 2 mothers.
Mm.
So, I had this opportunity to reconcile with my mother, and I did. And unfortunately, none of my other family members did. Her 2 brothers and her sister did not get to see her, and she passed away about 9 months after my visit.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity and that I got to see her doing well. That was such a relief for me.
You got to
And
see her in some ways.
yes,
Mm.
yes, to see her living her life and being okay, really truly being okay, being good, not behavior-wise. I mean, she was good.
Yeah.
And that was something I had never gotten to see from her.
Yeah. What a gift.
It
What a
really
gift.
was. And I wonder, uh, you know, what if a caseworker had gotten involved earlier when my brother and I were still in our mother's custody? What if, what if there was a caseworker who had gotten her on medication? What could my life have looked like? And I don't dwell on could-haves or should-haves or would-haves. I don't
And
dwell
also,
on those.
what could her life have looked like? Could it have been like the end a lot earlier? And I mean, I think that those are some of the things, having worked in, lots of helping professions, that, I don't want people to feel overly responsible, but like, you know, and I don't think this is just people in helping professions, because it could be that teacher or that friend or that neighbor, but that what we do for people, the kindness that we show them, the protection, like that your aunts or your family members tried to give you, all this stuff that we do for people that may not be consequential may make all the difference in someone's life. Sometimes it might be 3 or 4 words that you say that just really stick in their head and change everything. But
Absolutely. I
yeah,
had teachers who did that for me. You mentioned your mom being a teacher and my daughter's going to be a teacher. I had teachers who did that for me. I was in 3rd grade and had Dr. Ann Weiss, and when I was no longer in her class, when we were living in government housing, again, we couldn't afford shampoo or conditioner or anything like that. She would collect the little sample size anytime she went to a conference or stayed in a hotel. She would collect them, and then she would come bring them to me. And she was literally taking her own life into her hands because the government project where we lived, in fact, if you Google it nowadays, Haverstock Hill Apartments, you'll see reviews that say, oh, there are only a few murders. It's not that bad. Just mind your own business. You'll be fine. So she did that for me. And then one other teacher, my senior year, she she was married to an Exxon executive. She taught because she loved it, not because of money. And she paid out of her own pocket to have 4 personal computers put in her classroom. And every morning I would come in and I would search for scholarships. And then I would, print out a letter asking for the application. These were very early internet days. So I would mail the letter. They would mail the application back. I would fill it out with a typewriter. That was my first credit card purchase. I wanted a typewriter so my applications would look nice. And then I would mail those back. And one day I came in the morning just like any other day, and she didn't look good. And I asked her, and she said, "No, I don't feel well." And she was hospitalized. I asked if I could come visit her. She said no. She didn't want me seeing her like that. But before she passed, and she passed 6 weeks later from when I asked her if she was okay, she told her husband before she passed to give me one of those computers out of her classroom so that I would have a computer to take with me to
Oh,
college. Yeah,
oh, that's so beautiful.
it really is.
Oh, that's so
So,
beautiful. Yeah. Some people are just amazing. I wanted to give you a chance before we wrap up. I was just thinking about your entire journey, and there are probably so many lessons that we could learn from it. And just thinking about, I really do believe like there is something to say, like the beautiful people that come into our lives that touch us. There's something to be said for fate. There's something to be said for chance. And there's something really beautiful about, I think, being willing to share this much of yourself because we don't deserve it. It's an act of grace to share it with us. So, without sort of like setting the stage, I'm curious what kind of hopes and dreams you have for people who are going through any of these things, whether it's depression or struggling in the foster care system or struggling at home or any of these other things that we've talked about. What do you hope for them?
so I hope that people can see my story, hear my story, podcast, book, whatever, and know that it's possible to get to the other side. And with the foster care system, I don't know how to approach it exactly, but we've got to make reforms. We've got to make changes. And I will go on as many podcasts or speeches or anything, whatever I can do to put that more front and center, to make it part of our debate, our local, state, federal debate that we have to do better by our foster kids because we're failing right now.
Yeah.
So my hopes and dreams are really to make an impact on that. And as I mentioned, just changing the trajectory of one person's life. If I can change, and I mean truly profoundly change, which is not an easy thing to do. It's very hard for a person to change. But if I can change one person's life, if I can give them hope, if I can give them the courage to just stay in it, stay alive one more day, um, I feel that it'll have been worth all the pain that I've relived and gone through.
Mhm. Do you have hope?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, I am now living a life that if you had told 15-year-old Adriene that she would have the life that I do now, 15-year-old Adriene would have called you a liar. So, and I mean that very sincerely. She wouldn't have been able to comprehend the life that I have now. And I have that hope, not just for myself, but for those kids in foster care. But I have hope, and I'm going to do whatever I can to push the foster care situation into the limelight.
There's a book. It's called All God's Children. And Maya Angelou wrote a book with the same name, but I'm not talking about that one. This one's by a reporter for the New York Times, Fox Butterfield. And it's, he never said, here's why I chose this title, but it's about a guy named Willie Bosket who grew up not the world's best family. It was actually quite terrible. And if you actually go back, because Fox in the book goes back generations, and you can sort of see in the generations, like his grandfather could have been a lawyer, but X, Y, or Z. This person could have been that. But all this brokenness had gotten passed on. And Willie was a guy who was in prison. He got grabbed in 3 strikes, you're outlaw, and then eventually committed murder, and so on and so on. And one of the things that always struck me about that title, and that it's always been a reminder for me, that we're all God's children. So all of those children out there are ours. And I don't think it's just the words of the state, but I think that's just a stark example for me of how clear it is, the children who are most obviously our children, most clearly our children, how we fail them. And I think that if people think about it more, if they hear more stories like yours, they're going to be encouraged to find ways to take care of our children. Like,
it's my greatest.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Well, I think this is a great spot to stop. And before we go, I just want to thank you again for being willing to share so much and so much insight. I feel like this will be a powerful conversation for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and one that probably more than you even realize will give people hope.
That would be fantastic. It's been a privilege being here with you, having this conversation.
Adriene, once again, thank you. And we should stay in touch.
I would love that.
Awesome.
I would love that. Take care.
If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We'll see you guys all again soon.